The launch of Star Citizen's Alpha 321 on OpenPTU has definitely stirred up a lot of hype within the Star Citizen community. And unless you live under a rock, you'll know that it is mostly due to the inclusion of Stanton's 3 jump points, one each for Terra, Magnus, and Pyro. And while the jump points themselves aren't actually there, but instead the gas clouds, space stations, and signage that surround them, rampant speculation has occurred, much of it centered around the idea that Alpha 4.0, the Pyro system, and server meshing are closer to release than previously thought. I'm here to provide some context surrounding the development that you might have missed. That way you can make informed decisions about how to manage your own hype and expectations. And at the end of the video, if you like this content and want to help me in my mission of supporting StackUp.org, please consider giving a like, subscribing, and leaving a comment below. Much of the belief that Pyro and server meshing are coming SoonTM has been based around not only the inclusion of the jump points in Stanton, but also this statement from the Inside Star Citizen episode Meshing Together on February 16, 2023.
The key thing that we're doing with this is server meshing is also tied into the Pyro, the delivery of the jump gates to get to Pyro. It's not quite the same problem, but it also kind of is. When you actually do a jump to get to Pyro, we have to transfer authority from the Stanton DGS to the Pyro DGS. What we want to do, of course, is have multiple DGS per star system, but we're separating the actual jump gate stuff from the actual server meshing stuff, so that we get to the point so we can actually assure Pyro's delivery, and whilst we worry about the actual server meshing delivery. So we're actually, those are now, from our perspective, 2 different problems.
Many of the claims that say server meshing is coming sooner, or that Pyro is launching without server meshing, are dismissing what is actually said in the quote and taking it out of context. While yes, they are intending to handle the transfer of entity authority from one star system to another differently than from meshed servers within a system, many people didn't listen to the rest of the quote from lead producer Roger Godfrey.
So very early on, we're going to be tackling what we're calling separation of the replication layer out from the DGS. So that's the thing which replicates all our data. It allows communication. It's a single source of truth in memory for the state of the entire universe at any given time. That's going to get separated out from the DGS that currently holds all the fun simulation stuff that's happening at the moment. That's a first key step, both to delivering Pyro, all the technical backend for the jump gates, and it's also a kind of first big step for server meshing. So that's what we're going to be tackling initially.
He specifically says that the separation of the replication layer from the dedicated game server is still not only a prerequisite for delivering the functionality of jump gates, the Pyro system, and server meshing, but also that it is the first big step, as in there are multiple, including services like crash recovery, which we'll hear about in just a minute. The second piece of the puzzle is the critical one, because much has changed since February 2023. Less than a month later, Alpha 3.18 released with persistent entity streaming, and, well, we all know how well that went. But since then, CIG has continued to develop persistent entity streaming and work to stabilize the game, and just recently we received substantial information about the path forward to server meshing. This first piece was from the post-mortem for Alpha 3.18 and 3.19, which were lumped together due to them being on the same code branch. In the post-mortem, Benoit, now Chief Technical Officer for CIG, told us that, as we begin to roll out the replication layer split and crash recovery, 2 things now enabled by PES, we will do so gradually, and as we begin to deliver server meshing, we will create dedicated testing channels to harden those new technologies further and implement standards and thresholds before we graduate them to PTU and then live. At the bottom of the post-mortem segment on PES, Benoit also goes on to tell us the team responsible for PES has now moved on to static server meshing and are embracing a transformation approach to the new project. Unlike PES, this foundational technology can be integrated into the codebase gradually, avoiding a disruptive Big Bang approach. Parts of the server meshing tech are already available to the game team for testing compatibility with their game features. Combined with the Cloud Test Launcher, this approach aims to facilitate a smoother integration process for static server meshing. This is particularly important because we know from the May 18, 2022 letter from the chairman that to support PES, we needed to create 12 new services. For server meshing, only 4 more services are currently planned. Now, whether the replication layer separation and crash recovery are part of those 4 services, or those are included in the 12 for PES, we don't really know. And there are many services that are part of the holistic system that is persistent entity streaming and server meshing. We also know that the new matchmaking service and login flow also wasn't included in 3.18 with PES, due to not only the availability of developer resources to work on it, but also in order to keep the initial rollout of PES as manageable as they could while still delivering the minimum viable product of PES. We also know that it was planned to introduce changes to matchmaking following the launch of PES and 3.18, but have not heard anything about these necessary changes or how they fit in the plan going forward. Lastly, in a September 29th Spectrum post by Benoit, we learned that instead of an Alpha 320.1, we would instead see Alpha 321, because during the patch cycle after the release of 321 to live, almost assuredly during CitizenCon, we would begin testing the separation of the replication layer from the dedicated game servers. This post, however, doesn't mention testing of crash recovery, as was said in the post-mortem, so we can assume that testing for that service will come after the release of replication layer separation. All this is to say that we know, at a minimum, the separation of the replication layer is necessary before CIG could potentially implement the previously mentioned minimum viable product to introduce Pyro. We know that was the plan before the disastrous release of 3.18 and PES, and that the plan could very well have changed since then with the lessons learned in the post-mortem. We also know that CIG is planning to gradually implement the requisite services and technology for server meshing instead of the Big Bang approach. And the testing for that process won't be starting until after the launch of 3.21, so the end of October at the earliest. Thankfully, it sounds like we'll be hearing more about the new preview channel testing and the deployment plans for server meshing and its prerequisite technologies at CitizenCon. So what do you think? Do you think we will see Pyro and the minimum viable product of server meshing in some form before the end of 2023? Or do you think that this new gradual approach will take us further into 2024, but with a smoother release process than 3.18?
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
Let me know in the comments, and please take a look at all the citations that I've placed in the description below and read them for yourself. And if you have questions, hop in my Discord and come chat with me in the community. Thanks for watching.